Hi, this is Angela. This is just a short video about Doris Day, who died yesterday at the age of 97. People around the world mourn Doris today. My mother was a big movie buff, and I was her partner in crime. I became her movie partner when I was very young, and I'm old enough to have gone to every Doris Day movie in its first run in the theater. Doris had a pretty interesting life. She always said she wanted the white picket fence and to be happily married and, to be a mom. It just never worked out for her. She had 4 tragic, disastrous marriages. But at an early age, she showed talent in dancing, and her parents spent quite a tidy sum on her dancing lessons. And when she was 15, her mother drove Doris and her dancing partner out to California. And on the way out there, they were involved in a bad accident, and Doris's leg was crushed. And so her dreams of being a dancer were crushed also. They returned home to her uncle's in Cincinnati, and while Doris was recovering, she was listening to lots of Ella Fitzgerald and some of the really good jazz singers, Billie Holiday, and the blues singers, and she really fell in love with singing. So her mother, the eternal stage mom, got her singing lessons. And at the age of 15, Doris started singing with Bob Crosby's band. He was the brother of Bing Crosby, and his band never really did much. But when she was 16, she was introduced to Les Brown and the Band of Renown. Those of you that are real young, you hear Les Brown, and you think of the guy that is the motivational speaker. Well, in the late 30s and 40s, you said Les Brown, and everyone knew that you were talking about the hottest poppin' big band out there. And so Les really fell in love with Doris's voice. He fell in love with her freckles, her cute, uncapped teeth, her sweetness, her sultry voice, the sexiness that she could put out there without trying. So he lied to all the nightclubs and told everyone that Doris was 17 so that she could travel and go on the road with his band. And it was from Les Brown that Doris gained her most fame. She filmed Sentimental Journey with his band, and his band was just top notch, and it became a #1 seller. And by the time World War II came along, every single guy out over there, he would hear Sentimental Journey and tears would come to his eyes. They would think of the girl next door, Doris, and they would think of how much they missed being home. And that stayed her signature song until The Man Who Knew Too Much with Jimmy Stewart, when she sang Que Sera, Sera. Doris was just very unhappily married. Her very first husband was when she was 19, and he was a trombone player she met through Les Brown's band, and his name was Al Jordan. And Al was a very jealous man, and the second day of their wedding, he beat Doris senseless because he had seen her kiss a fellow band member on the cheek at the wedding who gave them a wedding present, and that was a reason to beat her. And not long after, Doris found out she was pregnant, and Jordan tried to force her into an abortion. She refused, and he beat her unmercifully, hoping she would have a miscarriage, and she did not. And sadly, he did beat her during the majority of their marriage, the entire 9 months of her pregnancy. She gave birth, took her son Terry, left, and gave him to her mother, and she went back out on the road. Back then, it was a different world. Artists did not travel with their children. So Doris had to go do what she had to do. And within a short while, she met another man named George White, who she fell madly in love with, and they had quite the affair, and they were talked about all over Hollywood because they were traveling and staying in hotel rooms together when they were unmarried, and back then you just didn't do it. So public opinion pretty much forced her to marry him. And he did not beat her. He beat her son. When she married George, she wanted that picket fence, so she brought her son to live with them, and he did not want children. So after 2 years, Doris had had enough, and she took Terry and left. And it was a few years later, she's still in her 20s, mind you, that she met the producer Martin Melcher, and in 1951 they were married. And Doris thought she really had it all now. She did have the white picket fence. Her husband loved her son. He adopted him, gave Terry his name, Terry Melcher. And, Doris saw, this is it. Well, Martin Melcher did not run around on Doris. He did not beat Doris. He ran around on her, which was very hurtful. In the last few years of their marriage, they slept in separate wings in their house. So Doris was so sad about this, and being a sexual woman, she retaliated, and she had an affair with Ronald Reagan, and they were madly in love. Then after that, she had a few minor affairs, and when she was making her second James Garner movie, The Thrill of It All, Mickey Mantle had a little brief walk-on part, and they had an affair, and he bragged about it to all of his teammates, and it was pretty crude, and how good he said she was in bed, which back then, you just didn't talk that way. So sadly, Doris is now in her third marriage and not happy, but she's keeping up the facade. And then suddenly, in 1968, her husband dies, and Doris is hit with a real bombshell. She had earned $20 million during her movie career up to this point. Her husband dies suddenly. Doris wakes up the next morning, finds out she has no money. To make it worse, she's $500,000 in debt. Martin Melcher had trusted a con artist lawyer named Rosenthal. He sold them land that did not exist. He treated her money as if it was his own, and he stole $20 million from she and Martin Melcher. Martin knew and kept it from Doris. And to save them financially, unknown to Doris, he signed a contract for Doris to do a television show. Well, back then, that was a kiss of death on your career. No one that was a star did television, no one. Well, Doris felt forced to, so she did not break the contract, and that was how the Doris Day Show began. During this time, Doris still continued to have her love of animals, never met a dog she didn't want to bring home that was a stray, and it became her passion. The Doris Day Animal League merged with the Humane Society, and it's just been a wonderful organization for 50 years. Doris and her son Terry ran a hotel where people could even bring their dogs to sit with them at the table while they ate. Sadly, her son Terry died in 2004 of melanoma. A little side note, Terry Melcher became a big Hollywood record producer, and he produced Tambourine Man and 2 of the Byrds albums, and was friends with Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys. And through Dennis Wilson, he was introduced to Charles Manson. He, being Terry, went out to the Spahn Ranch twice and listened to Manson and his fellow troopers perform. And he didn't think they were really mainstream, so he did not sign them. But he did tell his mother about Manson, and he told her it was real unnerving that the knife play and guns, and that he felt like Manson was a pretty violent man. So 2 times, Manson and Dennis Wilson were in the car and dropped off Terry Melcher at the Ciala Drive home, where Sharon Tate and her friends were murdered in 1969. And Terry Melcher was living there with his girlfriend, Candace Bergen. So Doris not only was financially in a strap, because this is just a year after she found out she owed the $500,000. But she just had this feeling that Manson was wild and wicked and dangerous, and she asked Terry to give up the rental and come home. So he did, and his mother's intuition saved his life. The night of the murders, Manson told his minions to kill Terry Melcher and Candace Bergen and anyone else who was there. And sadly, Sharon Tate and her friends were in the wrong place at the right time. But luckily for Doris, her son was saved. And, it just, as was a tragic thing, it changed Terry for life, that he could have been, the one butchered, he and Candace Bergen. But Doris was a beautiful lady, inside and out. And one other little cute thing about Doris that I love. Watch one of her movies and notice that in every shot of Doris, she looks very dewy and as if the camera is kind of glowing. They used a filter on the camera lens that they called a freckle filter. And the freckle filter took out all of Doris's freckles and made her just look like she glowed. And then the camera would pan to her male co-star, and he would be crisp and clear, and it would go back to Doris, and she would look all soft and dewy. And I would go to her movies and just hope to see one picture, one shot where I could actually see Doris's freckles, but it never worked out that way. But rest in peace, Doris Day. And America thanks you. We thank you for the laughter. Your movies were just so cute. One of my favorite Doris Day movies was Midnight Lace with Rex Harrison. It was a drama and kind of a thriller. And she also did an excellent job in The Man Who Knew Too Much, the Alfred Hitchcock movie, where she starred with Jimmy Stewart, which of course is where she first sang Que Sera Sera, which almost was cut from the movie. They thought that it was campy, and it ended up being the main theme to the movie, because that's how she ended up finding her son that had been kidnapped. But thank you for listening to my little memories of Doris Day. And Doris, I hope that when you got to heaven, that the big guy up there had you about 300 acres. I know that quite a few of your friends that crossed over the Rainbow Bridge were waiting for you. God bless you, Doris Day.